GST evasions have become a major challenge for the government. Goods and Service Tax authorities detected evasions worth 1.32 lakh crore in 15,500 cases in 22-23 financial year, an increase of approximately 44% over the previous financial year. Now, evasions worth 14,302 crores were detected in 2,784 cases during April to May alone this year. Now, this, of course, as per data shared by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in a question responding in Lok Sabha. The GST department is taking a number of anti-evasion measures, which include using robust data, analytics, artificial intelligence to identify and track risky taxpayers. In fact, former West Bengal Finance Minister Amit Mitra wrote a letter to Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman alleging that GST frauds are proliferating across the country and MSMEs are facing a major problem due to a web of regulations. We are trying to understand what is leading to increased cases of GST evasions, GST fraud. To discuss that, who better than Subhash Chandra Garg, the former Finance Secretary, joining us on the show at this point in time. Interesting figures there. A high number of GST evasions. Obviously, government trying to also put their finger on who are these people trying to evade taxes. There have been at least 28 arrests made so far. So punitive action as well as action by the way of, trying to get that money back that many of these entities have so far evaded by the way of taxes, Krishna.
Right, and this comes on the back of us doing story after story about the number of fake GST accounts in this country. So there's, I'm just trying to understand, if there's any impact of those fake GST accounts on the amount of GST evasions that these numbers have thrown up. But clearly, worrisome numbers over there, and the fact that arrests have been made makes it clear that the problem has been existent for a while now, and I think the crackdown has begun on these GST evasions. Wondering how, because once you get a GST number, it becomes incumbent upon you to file a return every month, and the moment you don't file that return every month, you get penalized for it as well. So how is it possible? What is the chinks in the system per se, where it is even possible for people to evade GST? Where exactly is the system wrong in identifying people's actual revenues made via through their GST numbers, and what they're not paying to the government, or what they do? In my sense, I have a feeling that if you see that there is a total number of GST accounts that are available in India, and they're supposed to pay an X amount of tax every year. My question is that database right? Are we even looking at the right number of GST accounts in the country when we know it for a fact that you can fake your Aadhaar and your PAN card to get your GST account?
Which is, by the way, a criminal offence to fake your Aadhaar and PAN card. I want to quote slightly from what Mr. Mitra wrote in his letter to the Finance Minister, and he said, out of the 69,426 GST identification numbers verified during the last 2 months, 20,000 were found to be non-existent. So essentially alluding to the fact that these are fraudulent registrations that have been done solely to avoid taxes. Another interesting point that he mentions is that out of the 1.4 crore businesses registered with GST, only 0.42% of registered taxpayers were actually verified. So you've got a very few number of actual taxpayers who have also registered their business, which means that increasingly shocking 30% of non-existent and fraudulent registrations were discovered in the last 1 year. Those are some very staggering, difficult figures to digest.
There you go.
It essentially means
people
that
commit a criminal offence to set up a GST account. You're telling me that those people will be willing to pay taxes that are actually due? No wonder there are so many evasions already. What is worrisome is that already there are just about 69,000 GST accounts, out of which you're seeing a good fraction of it, not a very small fraction, a good portion of it, which is fake. So to me, the problem lies over there. You start fixing it from there. You sort of finally get an idea of how much evasion is taking place and how much you can plug the leaks in the system when it comes to getting the money from the taxpayer. Okay,
and it's not just the people who are trying to find innovative ways to not pay taxes. It's also how difficult it is to comply with the regulation. Now, another interesting figure that comes into fore is how complex GST is for MSMEs. As many as 770 notifications have been issued so far, which essentially means that the regulation is tweaked almost couple of times every year. which makes it extremely difficult for various industries. And we're looking at data there. Perhaps you can run us through this data, Krishna, how difficult it becomes for any of these industries, from your cancer drugs to your movie ticket.
This is what is reminding me of the times how your ghar ka address used to change in the 80s, 90s, when they kept changing the numbers of the streets and changing the names of the streets. It's one of those things where the new announcement keeps coming up so often that it's very difficult to figure out what is old and what is new rate. It's good that we have these graphics on our screens, which clearly tells you what the new rate is and what the previous rate was. We still have no surety if this will remain where it is, and what's the next iteration going to be. Be that as it may, the fact of the matter is that the high levels of evasion of GST also comes on the back of the high levels of collections we're witnessing with GST. Fact of the matter is that GST collections have been beating estimates and expectations on a regular basis. So there's no reason to be alarmist at this stage, to be really honest, Shweta, about these GST evasion numbers. What is important is to figure out the fact that yes, there is a lacuna in the system that where you are finding people not just faking their own GST accounts, but also finding ways to not pay the tax that they are due to pay to the government.
In fact, rates of more than 400 items of goods and services across 100 categories, not less than 100, that's triple digit categories, have been changed till date since GST was introduced. Well, so, the problem here essentially is, Krishna, by the time you understand the taxation, for example, if I am a company that is in the business of fisheries, by the time I understand how much tax I am to pay, the tax slab gets revised, and it gets revised. And not just that, compliance it becomes increasingly difficult by the way of how complex the paperwork is, which is why MSMEs have not been able to cope up.
Absolutely. Monthly filing of returns for GST, which is being made compulsory, and now you get phone calls if you don't file your GST on time, and there is a late payment fee as well. So monthly filing of GST returns in itself adds to the paperwork and to the process and the procedure. So we begin over there. So compliance, there are challenges to compliance, but what we have to understand is that GST has been on a journey ever since it was first introduced. There have been improvements, there have been changes. Bear in mind, if you're saying that so many changes are there, check with the guys who are doing online gaming. They would want a change in the last slab that they got. They got 28%, the highest sin tax possible. So, the fact that it's fluid, the fact that it's changing, in a way, I would see it as dynamic. The fact that the feedback is being taken, and then they're trying to figure out, what needs to be taxed absolutely at the highest slab, and what can be, you can let go of. So many of them that we just saw on the graphics, if you can pull them again, 0% GST right now, from what they used to be, from 18% to 5%, from 12% to 0%. So those variations, in a sense, are good. This is taking in feedback. Cancer drugs, 0, thank you. Medicines and food for special medical purposes, 0, thank you. Private satellite launch services, 0%, thank you. Food and beverages purchased along with movie tickets, 5%. Oh, thank you very much. You know how much I love the movies. There you go. Fish soluble paste, 5%. Uncooked, unfried snack pellets, 5%, 18%. I mean, they're helping us snack as much as we want to, and helping us watch movies and snack with some good popcorn over there as well.
As happy as you are, I'm not sure if Mr. Garg, who's joining us back, is very happy with those numbers. But I think something that perhaps a lot of us can draw from you've been in the administration, perhaps draw from your knowledge of how to work around GST evasions. I think it's a major problem for the government. What is your suggestion?
Are you asking me?
It is for you,
yes,
sir.
sir.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
We don't have the wealth of knowledge that you do.
So let me hear your question again. I wasn't really...
Right. My question to you is, as a former finance secretary, what would your advice be to the finance minister who's currently perhaps having a difficult time working around GST evasions?
See, my sense is that GST... in terms of the revenue performance, is doing reasonably well, though not as spectacularly as it was doing last year. You saw the numbers which came today, 1.65 lakh crore, which is about 11% higher than the same year last year. So performance is, tax performance is just all right, nothing great about it. But there are bigger problems around the issues which are to be resolved by the GST Council and the Ministry of Finance. For example, how do you handle this gaming tax, which is a problem? there are a lot of issues
Mr. Garg,
connected with.
I'll come to gaming tax and I'll come to other teething issues. They continue to be teething issues for some reason, even as GST has become an adult. But I want to talk specifically about GST evasion, sir. Some data that we have pulled up, and this is coming from Finance Minister, data that the Finance Minister has shared in Lok Sabha, alluding to evasions worth 1.32 lakh crore in financial year 22-23, an increase of 44%. It appears that entities, people who are filing these GST, filing the registrations and the taxes, are coming up with new innovative ways to avoid paying up the taxes.
See, there are three layers of issues over there. The first layer of issue is what the Finance Ministry claims, that they have detected evasion. And then the second layer is when they go out, issue notices, what people or the businesses confirm, and then they determine that this is actually the evasion. And finally, you recover
Are you saying the actual number could be far higher than this? Because this is what the
No,
government
far
said.
lower than this.
Far lower? Okay.
The number which is claimed to have been detected is far higher than the number which is actually determined finally as tax evaded. And then there is still much lower realization of the supposedly evaded tax. So I don't think we should be too much concerned about this kind of claim that there is very widespread. I by no means am suggesting that the GST loopholes should not be plugged in. I'm also not suggesting at all that those who practice fake invoicing or claim fake input credit, etc., should be dealt with soft hands, nothing at all. But the real collection of the GST from this is much smaller than what the impression goes around. That I computed, I think I wrote once a piece that is not even 1% of what the GST collection is. So we should not go out of the way and give it a disproportionate kind of image that there is so widespread evasion in the country.
Okay.
Right, fair enough. The only thing I want to ask you is that we're also talking about evasions at a time when there's so much headlines about the number of fake GST accounts. People faking Aadhaar cards and PAN cards to get fake GST numbers. 20,000 odd GST accounts are non-existent. That's the latest data. That is a concern. That's where, in a sense, all of this begins and ends up as evasion of taxes eventually.
So there are again two basic issues. Number one, since we have a system of GST in the country where there is a large scale sort of exemption for small businesses. So, and then there is also compounding facilities available to another good set of number of the businesses there. Of the GST, registered GST dealers, about 1.4 crore or so, whereas the total business is over 8 crore. So a large number of businesses operate in the country without being part of the GST network. And of those who are registered, they also then have this compounding and other kind of practices which allow them not to be part of a very robust GST chain. As a result, it so happens that there are people who, by using these opportunities of compounded tax and other, issue the GST invoices which may turn out to be fake, or obtain the fake registration numbers. There is also an issue connected with the what today is coming out as the electronic businesses who don't have a fixed place to work, etc. And therefore, in a traditional, stricter sense, they may not be the existing businesses, but they are not. the fact that we have so much of GST filing and we have
Okay.
so many of
You know,
the
I think from what you're trying to allude, sir, and for the benefit of our viewers, just to break it down from your very difficult parlance to an easier one, it's becoming difficult for businesses to comply. And correct me if I'm wrong, if that's what you're alluding to, it's becoming difficult for businesses to comply given how complex the structure is. And something that your perhaps former colleague, the former finance minister of West Bengal, Amit Mitra, has also written to the current finance minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, about that it is becoming MSMEs who are falling through the crack because they are not able to comply with the existing norms. In fact, we have the letter that is written where he talks about GST frauds proliferating across the country, penetrating each and every state. And in fact, on the other hand, regulation is so overpowering for MSMEs that they are on the verge of deregistering. Do you agree with that statement?
That statement is partially correct in my judgment. While electronic infrastructure and framework which has been created in GST is a fabulously efficient and good one, you would believe me, this operates flawlessly, it operates very well. But then there are large number of GST registered as well as those who are not in the GST system who have to operate manually. For example, today, I think less than 5 crores turnover guys are not required to generate business to business electronic invoices. So as a result, they operate under a system where what Mr. Mitra or Dr. Mitra was referring to, they have to do enormous amount of manual kind of work, filing of forms, etc., returns and other things, which is too difficult and wondrous for them. I think it would require for us to move towards a system where everyone, including the small businesses, comes on the electronic platform and they are enabled to work effortlessly as part of the. So whenever somebody takes a payment, the system can be so simple,
right,
electronic system, that you generate the invoice automatically. This can be done. It happens abroad. It happens in many countries. So if we sort of make, which seemingly looks like a difficult thing to do, that you bring so many small businesses into the GST network, but which actually is the solution, not them. So the ask there is that you should be able to do it as part of what they do as a transaction rather than a very complicated system of generating invoices separately, filing manually, etc.
Right.
And you can also incentivize that system by providing these small businesses the credit which they don't need to deposit to the government. So those kind of incentives can also be built in. So the next level of reform actually is to bring everyone into the GST network and create a very simple GST system.
All right. Mr. Garg, thank you very much for your important, crucial piece of advice and information. I hope government is listening. The GST Council pays heed. You have the wealth of knowledge. You've worked this system. You've worked in the system, and I hope we continue to improve this system. Thanks very much. But before I let you go, and before I let our viewers go, interesting numbers that are coming in by the way of GST revenue collected in the month of July 2023, which is 1,65,000 crores, of which CGST was 29,773 crores and SGST is 37,623 crore, IGST is 85,000 crore and cess is 11,779 crores. So great numbers there, crossing the 1,65,000 mark as far as the overall GST collection for the month of July is concerned.
Second highest for the year.
Second highest so far for the year.
So as I said, those numbers are incredible. So the GST collection numbers continue to, top the charts, if I may. So that's a reality that we have to understand. Even as we try to understand how come so many fake accounts and how come so much evasion happens.
Look at the trend line there. This is the second highest since April, which is when it was 1,87,000 crore. So good news there for the government. Not sure if compliance is increasing. They continue to report more GST frauds, but overall figures are still as high as it gets.
Right.